So you know those people who take something you say and twist it to mean something completely different? Those same people who take one small problem that somebody has and they preach it like it's gospel but amplify it to be 100 times worse? I'm sure you've seen them. Some of them even live in my comment section. There is a major portion of the Genshin Impact community that takes what content creators and theory crafters say about a character, take out the context of team or a very specific environment, and make their misinformation everyone's problem. So today and over the next few days, I'm going to be talking about the Raiden, Yae Miko, and Kokomi banners coming up in 2.5. And overall, the goal is just to explain why a lot of the information about these characters is greatly exaggerated or misleading. As usual, if you do enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and let me know who you're pulling for next patch. Now, without further delay, my name is Braxophone, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Raiden Shogun. I'll get straight to the point. The main misconception about Raiden is that she's a bad unit without Constellation 3, or 2. Or just constellations in general. I've seen this all over Twitter, I've seen it all over Discord, I've seen it in Genshin Impact in-game chats. People are freaking out about Raiden's rerun because they're like, I need C2, my Raiden can't do damage without C2, she can't do damage without C3, Raiden is a terrible unit without constellations, what am I gonna do? There's usually a lot of doom posting that goes on in this community. I think it might just be a theory crafting thing because Genshin Impact has such a large theory crafting community that these people will hear something from a content creator and then they'll just take it as the undeniable truth and gospel and then exaggerate it 100 times over. I'm here to tell you today that Raiden is incredibly strong and brings a ton of value to any team that doesn't revolve around specific vaporize and melt reactions. So let me explain. We'll talk about her damage in a little bit, but first I just want to talk about why Raiden is good without damage. So Genshin has been releasing characters with horrible energy problems for a while. After Kazuha, almost every single unit has had a high energy cost burst. You have Kokomi with 70, Ayaka with 80, Sara with 80, Toma with 80, Goro with 80, Sayu has 80, and even Raiden herself has a 90 cost burst. And to be honest, I don't think that Yae Miko is going to be different either. Now, similarly to how Liyue introduced enemies that made you want to shield up and utilize the Geo Archon's ability, Inazuma introduced mechanics and characters that need another character to battery them or to have their entire setup be focused on energy generation. There are even some bosses that drain your energy now. You can even take a look at the new Bishop duo, where whenever you take a hit, you lose energy, and if you don't have energy, you lose a huge portion of your health. Clearly, MiHoYo wants to give you energy problems. They've been trying to make it so you have to build energy recharge on these characters or you have to run batteries, otherwise you're gonna have a bad time with new content. The same way they're trying to phase out shields by making it so there's some kind of corrosion or effects that can hit through shields. This is a common theme with Genshin. They're not gonna nerf characters that they've released, but they are going to put in new enemies that indirectly nerf those characters by making their kits less useful. But at the same time, they want to release characters that are more useful for the current content. That's why Kokomi is seen as a lot more valuable now, and I'll talk about that in another video. In relation to the energy problems we were just talking about, there were also 2 artifact sets that were released that are energy based, with Emblem of Severed Fate being meant for characters to battery themselves and Shimenawa requiring a battery character in many cases. So why are all of these energy mechanics being released, and why are they being released so aggressively? In MiHoYo's eyes, it's really simple. Raiden is actually the solution to all of these problems. Raiden unlocks the potential of almost every single Inazuma unit indirectly. While you wouldn't pair her with someone like Ayaka who's best in a freeze team, she is the best battery in the game and can be used with any character to help them generate their elemental burst consistently, regardless of the element that they are. Does that mean you should throw Shogun in any team? No, obviously not. You still want to play her optimally, but the idea and concept of her being a universal battery is incredibly strong and incredibly present. For example, one of Raiden's best teams is with Eula. You can use Eula, Raiden, Sara, and someone else, a Flex, a Viridius, and Fenrir user. There's a lot of characters you could use in that team, but the idea is that Raiden is going to help battery Sara and Eula, and you're going to be able to swap out and consistently buff your team while getting huge nuke damage with Eula with basically no effort at all. Regardless of what teams are at the top, Raiden is still going to be a great universal battery, and as long as she's not messing with your reactions, she's going to be usable in any other team. But on top of that, Raiden deals nuke damage. Now, you might be thinking, Raiden's burst isn't actually that great. Eula's is better, Ganyu and Hu Tao deal more damage with charged attacks, something along those lines. And you're right, Raiden's burst potential at C0 is low compared to top damaging units, but that damage still isn't bad. The amount of damage she can output with just the initial slash of her burst is actually pretty good, especially considering it covers a huge area. On top of that, when you're using slashes in her burst window, you're generating energy for the rest of your team. Raiden's energy generation is really solid, and though Fischl can come close to the amount of energy that Raiden provides, there's one thing that a lot of players overlook when they're comparing Fischl to Raiden, and that's comfort of play. Raiden is extremely easy to get a lot of value out of. Her elemental skill lasts a very long time, so you don't need to switch into her that often. She gets a ton of poise when she uses her burst, burst, meaning she doesn't get knocked over when using it that often, and it just makes her really hard to punish for bad play or lack of dodging. On top of that, whenever you're using Fischl's burst, you don't actually have iframes, so that can be really hard when you're against bosses, when you need to get Oz out on the field, but you get 1-inch punched by a Ruin Guard. On top of that, if we're just talking about strict free-to-play accessibility, though Raiden is a 5-star and Fischl is a 4-star, Raiden does have a very, very good free-to-play weapon called the Catch, which you can get by fishing, whereas Fischl doesn't really have a free-to-play weapon that's going to be insanely good for her on the same level that the Catch is for Raiden. Now, circling back to comfort of play, I'm not necessarily saying that Raiden is at her best when you're playing her without thinking too much, but what I am saying is that even if you don't play her optimal rotation, she still feels fine and deals decent damage while being an amazing battery. Now, why do people think that Raiden needs Constellation 2 or 3? Well, it's pretty simple. Raiden's Constellation 2 and 3 allow her to be a more powerful damage dealer and puts her closer to many other dedicated damage dealers for the amount of field time she takes up. Having up to Constellation 2 can increase Raiden's personal DPS by about 50%, which is a massive improvement and enables her to be a strong contender for carry units. Everyone sees her elemental burst and thinks that she automatically has to be a high damaging unit, and I would actually love for that to be the case by default. And to be honest, she's not a bad damage dealer. But if we're being real, without Constellation 2 and 3, she's not going to be on the same level as your Ganyu, Hu Tao, Xiao, any kind of hyper carry. Let's be honest though. 50% more of bad damage is still bad, but 50% more of good damage is amazing. If Raiden at Constellation 0 didn't have good damage to begin with, then nobody would be freaking out over her Constellation 2 or 3. She had to be sustainable and playable at C0, otherwise these constellations wouldn't do that much for her. But now some people are even talking about how C3 Raiden actually does as much damage or more than their C6 5-star DPS. I know this can sound really oversimplified, but 50% of 200 is significantly more than 50% of 100. If Raiden didn't have good damage to begin with, then her Constellations 2 and 3 wouldn't be as valuable. Now, I get it. Once you've seen free-to-play units hit over 100k on burst or even higher, it's really hard to rationalize a character dealing 80k on a burst being a reasonable pull, especially when they don't perfectly fit within multiplicative reaction teams like Melt and Vape. Those are always going to be the top of the meta as long as they increase your damage by such a huge amount. It's the same deal as when players believe in damage per screenshot over DPS. The idea that one big hit of damage is better than a bunch of hits that could possibly even add up to more damage than the big one. Now, that's not to say that Raiden is amazing damage either at C0. To put it bluntly, it's just good damage. It's not incredible, it's not amazing, it's just good. And that is why people feel the need to get her to Constellation 2 and 3. But consider this. There are many supporting units that deal damage. Some of them even deal damage at the same time as they're providing their support utility. And usually, there are exceptions, but usually when a unit provides great support, they don't really provide amazing damage. They may provide what you can call good damage, but generally speaking, it's the kit combined with good damage that makes the character good. And to this, Raiden is no exception. Even at C3, her core kit remains the same. Use her skill, generate particles while causing reactions, and every so often cast your burst for good damage and generate even more energy with her burst. Raiden may not be the best damage dealer at C0, and I mean it. Her damage is not the reason to pull for her at C0. But what makes Raiden a solid unit is that she provides more than damage. With all of these things considered, Raiden C0, at least for low spending or free-to-play players, will be more than enough to bring your team to 36 stars in Spiral Abyss. And more than that, she's easy and comfortable to play, making her, at least in my opinion, one of the best Electro units in the game, even at Constellation 0. With all that being said, you can pull for whoever you want. I'm not trying to say that it's a waste of time to get Constellation 2 or 3 because it's not. It's going to be a massive damage increase, but I know that if I was a free-to-play or low-spending player, I would not want to spend over 300 pulls to get a character guaranteed to Constellation 3, when those 300 pulls could go towards new units, new synergies, and potentially future meta teams. Right now, even with a C0 Raiden, you can still 36-star Abyss fairly easily with Raiden National, often called Rational, or Hypercarry Raiden with specific units. So if you're on the edge about getting Constellations, you definitely can, but don't feel like you need to. There are plenty of other units in the game, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities to get other strong characters that you definitely won't want to miss. Unless you're whaling, then just get everything.